Hello, and a very big welcome to all of you joining us for this Our Broken Planet live event. I have a question for you. How many times a day do you check your mobile phone? If you're anything like me, pretty much constantly, I imagine. For many of us, mobile technology has become central to our lives. More people around the world have access to mobile phones than have flush toilets. Our phones, tablets, our laptops, they connect us with our loved ones, they enable us to work and to play. But how much do we really know about the tech that we use every day? What are our phones made of? Where does this material come from? And what impact do they have on the planet? These are just some of the questions we'll be discussing today. This event is part of a year-long program called Our Broken Planet, How We Got Here and Ways to Fix It. Today, we'll be asking a panel of experts from around the globe, how can we make our smart future green? But this is your chance to ask questions too and join in the conversation. So do post any questions or comments you have in the chat box. We'll answer as many of your questions as we can as we go through the show. Now, our first guest today is museum scientist Richard Harrington. Richard's research focuses on the impacts of cobalt and rare earth metals on the natural environment. He also works with the mining industry to consider better and more sustainable ways of mining. So let's say a very big welcome to Richard.
Thanks very much, Alison, and really glad to be here. And do hope we have a stimulating afternoon's discussion.
Absolutely, it's great to have you. Also joining us is Georgette Barnes-Ado. Georgette is president of the Association of Women in Mining Africa and Women in Mining Ghana. She's established her own locally owned mining and exploration supplies company. And amongst her many awards, she was selected as Female Entrepreneur of the Year by Invest in Africa, an NGO that champions small African-owned mines across the continent. Let's welcome Georgette.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Looking forward to this afternoon's discussions.
Lovely to have you, Georgette. Thank you so much. And finally, we have Tirza Voss. Now, Tirza is the Sustainable Materials and Mining Manager at Fairphone, a social enterprise that's working to build a movement for fairer electronics. Their latest product, the Fairphone 3 Plus, which launched in 2020, is made from over 40% recycled plastic, and it uses a system that allows owners to repair and replace parts themselves, which sounds fabulous. Let's say hello and welcome to Tirza.
Thank you, Alison. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
It's brilliant to have all of you. It's fantastic. We've got so many different perspectives today. I'm very excited about the discussion that we're going to have, because we're going to be talking about how we power a smart green future, which made me wonder what that ideal future might look like from each of your perspectives. So I did wonder if we could start by just getting a few thoughts from each of you on what your ideal green tech future would look like. Richard, if we start with you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Alison. Well, quite clearly, our green tech future should not be harming the planet. In fact, what we should be doing is having a net positive impact for all of what we do. So I would just put a vote in that we make sure that the things that we do moving forward all have that net positive impact for the people, for the planet, as well as bringing those new technologies to the fore.
For sure, that sounds brilliant. Georgette, how about you?
Yes, for me, yes, same thing. It has to be responsible. All the actors along the line of getting the materials for smart gadgets, all of us should be responsible and do responsible things in the sense of, making sure that where if you're supposed to use a certain kind of chemical, you make sure that that is what you're going to do. If you have to reclaim, you do your reclamation, decent work conditions, especially for the women involved in the mining sector. Yes, and consumers, from the consumer to the miner, the whole value chain, we all need to be responsible.
And Tirza.
Yeah, many good things said. I think at Fairphone we summarize good for people and planet. So I think referring to Richard's net positive, so leaving a positive impact and doing good for people and planet, and that means safe working conditions, good working conditions, fair incomes, healthy environments, natural environments, protection of biodiversity. All those aspects are part of doing good for people and planet.
Absolutely. All very, very, very good, very valid points. And we're going to be discussing how we might be working towards that ideal future. But first, I wanted to take a bit of a step back, because many of us give very little thought to who and what enables that technology that we use every day. So perhaps a good starting point is actually to find out a little bit about what goes into making our phones, what elements, what materials. Tirza, can you tell us what goes into your phones?
Yeah, that's a question we asked ourselves as well when we started as Fairphone. And the answer is many. We actually asked that question to our suppliers. So ultimately, we collected information from all the different suppliers that are in our supply chain to let us know and declare basically what kind of materials are making up the parts that they supply. And the answer is over 50 materials go into a phone. And that could mean that there's one material for one specific component. For example, we use cobalt in our battery, but it could also mean a material that is spread across so many different smart components and the making of a phone, for example, gold, which is really spread across numerous components and activities. And what you see on the slide actually that popped up, you see just 14 materials there and not the whole list of 50. And that's because we prioritized in our kind of responsible sourcing. We prioritized those materials where we think and where we looked at those are the ones that have an impact on people, on planet as we started, and where we really want to look into improvements and working towards a sustainable future. And that means starting somewhere. So a prioritization of those 50 materials was very much needed. And the 14 that we selected, you see on the screen, and you can also see where they are, for example, used.
Wow, I had no idea that it was that many. And these minerals, these metals, these elements, they have to come out of the ground, don't they? They're mined, Richard. Is that right? Most of them?
Well, yeah, most of them are. I mean, we're pretty good at recycling some of those materials that you saw in the phone, but some of the things like copper and aluminium and iron, we recycle a lot, maybe up to 70% of what we throw away. Actually, we don't throw away, we recycle it. But the problem is we're seeing a growth at the moment. And so we're having to mine more of those things to make the mobile phones, to the electric vehicles, the wind turbines. And actually, although we try to recycle and we use as much as we can, some of these are completely new metals where we've never mined them before, like lithium. It's an element we've only really started to mine in large quantities. So we can't look to a recycling market. We have to take them out of the ground. And for so many of these in the new technologies, we're having to look to mine them.
And where in the world do most of these metals and minerals come from? Is it all over?
No, I mean, that's the thing about it. Geology means that the metals and minerals have been put in the places where nature decided to put them. And it's not like a factory. You can't say, I'm going to have a mine in this place because it's the best place to put it. We have to go to where the minerals are. So for cobalt, a lot of that comes from Central Africa, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. For lithium, it comes from Australia and from Chile and so on. And actually, here's a diagram that Fairphone have put together. Maybe Tirza can tell us a little bit about where the metals for her phone come from.
Yeah, across the globe, indeed. And that's what the picture shows. And we don't know for every and all the materials that I mentioned, all the 50, where they exactly come from. We have, of course, our assembly manufacturer as a first point of entry from our supply chain. But then, as I said, there is so many different layers of sub-suppliers, of sub-suppliers, of sub-suppliers. So we try what we can to map all those steps up to the origin of those raw materials. And especially for the 14 materials that we focus on, we are sharing those results, and that's what you see on the map. That's definitely one of the public resources that we made available, where we find how our supply chain looks like. And that is across the globe. You can see here some examples of, for example, tungsten, a material that we use in our phone that's coming from Rwanda. Then that's refined in Europe, and ultimately then it's going to Asia for to be integrated in the component and the component manufacturing. Ultimately then for assembly and then into our phone. Other examples are indeed cobalt, Richard mentioned in the DRC, but then gold coming from Africa, but as well from Peru, where we source from fair trade certified mines. So it is spread across the globe, and it ultimately for us as Fairphone supply chain centralizes really then in the manufacturing that's happening in Asia.
It's a complex web, isn't it? So you've got elements being mined in one place, processed somewhere else, and then manufactured into something somewhere else. It's incredibly complicated. We actually had a question come in from one of our viewers mentioning that 5G masts are going up everywhere and asking, is there hope for the planet? It raises a question. Is demand for these elements rising? Are we needing more and more of them?
Well, yeah, currently we're in a period of growth because we're putting those new technologies in. I mean, hopefully we get to a point, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, where you've got materials that then you can recycle and reuse. It's just unfortunate that the new technologies are demanding a lot of new metals and materials. I mean, some great examples here. Here's pictures of electric vehicles and wind turbines. The more metal, ironically, more metal has to go into an electric vehicle than a normal internal combustion engine car, because there's lots of wiring to conduct the electricity around. There's metals in the battery. And in the wind turbine, we need lots of wind turbines to replace the single coal-fired power station. So it's a good thing to replace the coal power station, but it does mean that we have to build the new infrastructure that needs metals. But the good news is once we've built that, hopefully we can then just recycle those metals when a new technology comes along that's more efficient, and we can actually minimize and lessen our use of metals, because that seems to be the trend. If the technology changes, it should reduce the needs.
And all of this matters because sourcing these materials, it has an impact on the planet, but also on people. And the mining industry, it would be fair to say, has not had the best reputation when it comes to both environmental and social impacts. What are some of those big impacts of mining? Richard and Georgette, I'd be particularly interested to hear from you.
Well, I think Georgette can talk a bit about the impact on people, really.
Yes, mining is one of the sectors, it's a physical activity. It's just like construction. So the visual itself of the activity of mining looks destructive. But there are ways of mitigating this risk. And so as much as the effects look so bad, we have to remember that there are ways around that. And so we need to focus more on how to mitigate this. There's land degradation, loss of income, loss of livelihoods, and the impact on displaced people. But we will realize that some companies, some corporates have been successful where they have paid attention and have risk management mitigation efforts in place. And these things have to start even before you mine. There should be engagement with communities. There should be engagement with governments. And so once we engage the people who have lived in some of these places for hundreds of years, it's their home. And you wake up one day and say you are coming to mine gold. Of course, it's physical. You have to turn the ground. You have to drill. You have to crush. But there are ways around this, like I said, and especially with the small scale mining, where artisanal and small scale mining, it is an economic activity that employs a whole lot of people. Families depend on this. Communities depend on this. Governments, in my country, 34% of the gold produced in I think 2017 or 2018 was from the artisanal and small scale mining sector. I cannot give you the fiscal values, but I know that in percentage terms, which shows the immense value and the need for us to engage that sector and to make it responsible. A lot of the time, people do not have the technology. They do not have even access to the information to do the right thing. And a lot of the time, there are a lot of civil society organizations that get involved, but we realize that a lot of the involvement stays on training, and they do not act tooling. You need infrastructure, you need tooling. And so if we could help people to actually do the right thing, I think that most of us, everybody, consumers will be happy, producers will be happy, communities can be happy.
Tirza, I wondered I know you have some thoughts from a manufacturer's point of view of what responsibility there might be.
Yeah, I think Georgette just mentioned it, right? The engagement is very much needed. The infrastructure is needed. The investment is needed. And we heard about some of the challenges that are there, and especially also in the context of artisanal and small scale mining. It gets associated with poor working conditions. It gets associated with risks such as child labor. And at the same time, it provides that livelihood and that economic opportunity Georgette talked about. And I think it's important to recognize really the role then that indeed the supply chain and we as a company and our industry peers have to engage and to improve and to invest, basically, as Georgette said, to that infrastructure that is needed and to the betterment of that sector, so that it does provide a proper and a decent livelihood opportunity for those communities affected, and that it could actually be a driver for development rather than destructing. And really, especially if you dissociate yourself from that and try to avoid any of those risks, you're not providing a solution to some of these challenges. You're rather ignoring it. So I think, especially for Fairphone's perspective, that's how we set for ourselves a policy to engage, to proactively reach out and use the supply of those communities of the minerals and that they provide that are critical to our phone and to our supply chain.
We've had a really interesting question actually coming from one of our viewers, Charles, on YouTube, was asked that's directly relevant, asking, does the solution for more transparent supply lines lie with the big tech companies or with the government?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think what it needs is consumers to demand it, really, I think. And that if we can go to agriculture, where we go to our shop and we pretty much know where our vegetables come from, and sometimes we even know the farmer who produces it, and that's become because people want that information. And so I think we as consumers, we should be asking for it, and I guess we vote and we go buy a Fairphone because we understand a bit more about where the metals come from. But then it probably does need some intervention with some of with governments to actually insist that we have that information, a bit like with food labeling. That was government introduced that. So some form of intervention is probably necessary, but consumers should be demanding it, really. People should be wanting to know where their metals come from. And, it's quite nice with the artisanal mining in West Africa, where they're gemstone miners, where you can actually know, who even the lady who was mining your gem that come in the ring that's been made. And I think these all make consumers more feeling like they're connected with the product.
Right, because
yes,
at the moment.
I'd wanted to add to that it is possible, because it's being done. We have the Kimberley process for diamonds, where conflict diamond blood, what everybody knows, blood diamonds, and the Kimberley process has made it a transparent process. And then we have fair gold, and we have pact, and we have virtue gems, and we have the provenance project in gemstones. And so how do we translate that to this industry? It is possible.
We've already kind of started touching on this, so I'm going to jump straight into this next question, which is can mining go green? What does sustainable, ethical mining actually look like? I mean, we've already started answering this question, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Richard, from your point of view, can mining go green?
Yeah, I believe it can, and it is becoming greener. There's no doubt about it. The legacy was in many cases has been awful, and this is when people considered a mine in a sense of a cradle to grave. So at the end of a mine, a graveyard was left of something that was destructive. And I think what we need to think of is the situation. There's a picture coming up now. This is a mine that was in the United States, in Wisconsin, where the mine on the left was pretty ugly when it was being mined, but it's then been restored to something on the right there, which is a reconstructed ecosystem that is different to what was there before, but it can then be used for something. It could be used for growing crops, it could be a renewable energy center, it could be used for recreation, and so this is what mining should do. It shouldn't be just about the mining, it's about the legacy of the mine afterwards. And so that, for me, we should be going from cradle to grave, to cradle to cradle. So we should be leaving behind something that has a positive future.
Absolutely. Georgette and Tirza, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of governments making sure that the environmental and social impact assessments have to be transferred to the small scale sector as well. In my country, for example, it's being done for the large scale mines, but we need to get to a point where it's done for small scale mining as well, so that they know that if they have to take stock of the fauna in the area, if they can stockpile topsoil, it is done, so that it does not become an afterthought. It has to be something that is done right in the beginning. Yeah. And whilst this is being done as well, the other thing that needs to be added is governance, is decision making. Who are the people who are going to overlook these operations? It should not just be the business person and the regulator. No, it involves communities. And even in the communities, when they invite people to join these committees, they have to make sure that there's diversity, so that the whole community's interest is taken into consideration. Women and people with disabilities, everybody. And this should be done at the beginning and throughout the project life of these mining projects.
And Tirza, anything to add?
Yeah, maybe from a company perspective, then ultimately what does responsible sourcing then look like, right? And then how does that connect to the, I think, really good examples that Richard and Georgette gave of what a sustainable mining operations could look like, and how does that then translate for a company like Fairphone? How do we source from those mines, and how do we encourage that? So how we defined really a fair sourcing is through our fair sourcing principles. Really looking at the points just raised, using our demand and our function, if you may, or role in the supply chain as a user further as an end user, then asking our suppliers to really work on those improvements, and then using our demand and basically our buying relation also as a ways to engage and to invest ultimately in those sustainable solutions. Another one is, of course, not just, as I said earlier, moving away from those risks, but using them as an opportunity for improvement. So if we see a mine site that does need, as Georgette said, that requires further infrastructure or capacity building, or is there a mine site that could be transformed in such a net positive kind of impact, then use that as an opportunity for engagement, and not just as a risk if it isn't just yet, but use it as an opportunity for improvement in the future. And that connects to that third one, which I think is key in also our transition to getting there, is that notion of continuous improvement. So step by step, kind of together and working on that journey. We do need numerous stakeholders. It does require investment. It doesn't change overnight, but we do need to request and make sure that together we're on that journey of continuous improvement and transparently report on that progress, and monitor that progress so that we can ultimately see whether it indeed improves and ultimately has a positive impact. So that's how we look at it from a company perspective and in connection to how and where we source.
Now we currently have this situation where we might mine in one country, we might process in a different country, we manufacture in a different country. Where might some of these critical elements come from in the future? Richard, I know you're interested in looking at sources closer to home. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the time has come really to look at places, and I saw there was already a question in the chat about looking at wastes that we already have, and we could look closer to home. We've had mining in the past in Europe and across Britain even, and there is potential for some of that waste material to be used and repurposed, and at the same time it could be cleaning up a problem. So there is that opportunity, but also there's a real chance for some of these new metals like lithium. We have exploration going on in Cornwall, which suggests that there might be enough to help us to build the batteries that we need locally, and that means that we are producing metals locally that could feed a local industry, and there could be a logic in doing that, and it could reduce the carbon footprint of the mining because we're transporting less. We can control things maybe in more regulated environments, and so there could, and particularly if they're in old mining areas where, like Cornwall, where it could actually be quite beneficial. But there's also another side to this, as well as looking closer to home. We could be looking at ways of working with other places to take industry, if you like, to where the metals and minerals are, because we currently ship such a lot around the world. And maybe one logic is, and perhaps Georgette wants to comment on, building downstream development for other countries, other than bringing the raw materials to process in, outside their countries.
Yes, definitely. This is a point that I am really interested in, because the point is that if the raw materials are available in Africa as well and in other places, if we decide to start producing, processing, and everything in other parts, you are going to export it back to us. So I feel that it is at a point where, because of watching carbon print and the effect on climate change and all of that, how do we need to start looking at the downstream? What can we bring closer to the materials? Which industries can we bring closer to the materials, so that there is a partnership, there is collaboration, and some of these things are produced closer to where they are? There is lithium project coming up in Ghana. Can we, instead of just exporting lithium, can we actually look at bringing the industry closer here? Because we are using the batteries here as well in West Africa.
Mm.
Absolutely. I've just wanted to say we've got viewers watching from all around the world, which is fantastic, from India, Sicily, Burma. I just want to take a couple of viewer questions. We had a question come in earlier from YouTube asking whether the constant iteration of new devices, new electronic devices and models, is that exacerbating the problem?
Yeah.
Good question.
Well, probably Tirza can say, I mean...
Yeah.
No, it definitely is. And I think we do really, and I know we come to that, but we need to think also really in different models and circular models. So recycling is one piece of the story, obviously. And the more we recycle, the less we rely on new virgin mining. But as Richard said, that's not for the coming decades. We do have across the globe an increase in demand. So definitely part of that solution. And an answer to the question is yes, the increasing kind of demand for new devices is a part of the problem. And I think one way of looking at that as Fairphone is taking really a different approach. We encourage consumers to use phones much longer and encourage them to do so by having a modular design, a design which allows you to repair easily modules or components if they're broken, instead of replacing an entire phone. With the Fairphone 3 Plus, we enable also our consumers that had already a Fairphone 3 to upgrade to a better camera. So again, allowing for longer use of your existing phone already than having to buy a completely new one. So it definitely sits also in consumers willing to use their devices much longer. And of course, then companies also, like Fairphone is doing, designing and allowing for that to happen and to take place, and really rethinking that model altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had another lovely... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Georgette.
No, I had wanted to add that, yes, recycling is something that we should all really take up. And in Africa, you see that plastics are being recycled, but the technology for recycling phones, or what we call urban mining, which I experienced on a mine in Sweden, I haven't seen that technology yet in my home country, and I think it should be encouraged.
That's a really, really good point. We had obviously that question come in earlier from Anna Claudia on YouTube asking about recycling. So let's in the last sort of 10 minutes or so talk about this idea of the circular economy and how that applies in mining, because our current model is sort of take, make, use, throw away. What do we mean by the circular economy?
Well, I guess ultimately it's that we reuse what we've already got, we've already taken out of the ground. And so that demands that we aren't building anything in excess of the stock that we have to recycle. And I said earlier on, I thought that because of the growth in demand, even for things like copper, where we have very good recycling, we still need to mine new raw materials. And I think that's going to continue for a while. But we've got a very leaky circular economy. And if the diagram that you show there shows that we've got waste leaking out all the way around that. And we should be trying to make sure that we don't have waste that leaks out. So we try to make that loop as circular. Without a leaky circular economy is not a good one. But I think we're always going to need new materials, but we can improve and make sure we reuse, then recycle, and make sure we don't throw anything away.
Yeah, I was going to ask Tirza in particular to what extent, how close we are to that model from your point of view as a manufacturer, and what are the current barriers?
Yeah, I think Georgette said very nicely. We all need to start recycling, and I'm just gonna repeat that because if you take some of the statistics, not even 20% of e-waste was properly collected and recycled in 2019. So what happens with the rest of that 80%? That's only something we could guess, but experts kind of say that some of that does end up, as Georgette also hinted at in Africa, being shipped as either secondhand products or sometimes even waste where there isn't the infrastructure to really properly recycle this. It also ends up in sometimes landfills and just a proper the waste stream, but not the proper e-waste recycling stream. And I'm pretty sure for all those that listen in today, we all have a mobile phone somewhere stuck in a drawer or somewhere at home.
An old laptop or something hidden away at home.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, there is valuable materials in there and needing to properly recycle. So collect that first of all, so that it can get properly recycled is an important one, and one where we, all of us have a role to play. But I mean, apart from that, you mentioned, Alison, also the barriers. And I think that's something that shouldn't be underestimated, is that while some materials can easily be recycled, if you have really an end-of-life product such as our phone, even if you take the best recycling routes, you cannot take every and any material back in the same way. So you do have waste there. So for our case, we did a recyclability study to really understand, what can we get back? And that's 45% for our latest model, which is something we can't compare with other phones because not everyone publishes this information publicly, unfortunately, yet. But this probably is higher than average given the modular design that we have. But still, it shows, we can't take everything back. So I think that's a barrier, and we do need innovation and new ways of, making sure we are able to recycle as much as possible from end-of-life products.
Should we be designing with recyclability and repairability in mind in the first instance?
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, this what I was calling the cradle to cradle approach. You make sure that everything you design is designed to be reused or recycled from the word go. And we've just not been very good at that. So many of the products, particularly of my childhood, had to be thrown away because you couldn't repair them, which is crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely, which leads us, I think, quite nicely on to what we could do as individuals, because we had a question from Sonia actually on YouTube earlier asking, should we continue down the path of mining and to feed demand, or should we just be encouraging less demand? It's a very good question. What can we do as individual consumers? We have power.
The thing, I just speak as someone in the developed Western world. We can be very patronizing and say we don't want other people to have the things that we've got, so don't get the growth. And it's like, why are we mining more copper? Well, it's perhaps for people in a village in India to have electricity in their village. And so if you do it by recycling, then you have to give up your wire for that person to have. And I'm not sure that I feel happy lecturing that type of thing. I think as a developed world, we should perhaps be thinking about our use. When we change from 31.5 million cars, which are the internal combustion engine cars in the UK, 31.5 million, should they all become battery cars, or should we decide to have fewer cars? Well, that's a decision for society, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've got, in the last few minutes, we've had some really interesting questions from our viewers. So I just want to take a couple of those. Joe on YouTube, Joe Duff was asking, can the panel touch on ethics in the supply chain, batteries and cobalt in particular, and the use of child labour?
Yeah, I can explain how we are involved into addressing some of these issues. Indeed, it's a topic receiving more and more attention, and as Richard said in the beginning, cobalt's often mined in the DRC where there are risks associated, such as poor working conditions and child labor. Then looking and reflecting back on the sourcing policy and the principles I just mentioned, that's where we see, okay, then we have a role to engage, to improve, to invest, and to change that situation. So one of the things we as Fairphone did, particularly in this case, an example, is that we launched together with other stakeholders, so other industry players as well as NGOs, the Fair Cobalt Alliance, which is an action partnership that really comes together to work on some and address some of those key and critical issues such as child labor, improving the conditions on the mine sites that are there, working on better environment, providing the needed infrastructure Georgette mentioned earlier, but also addressing some of the other root causes like access to education and giving, ensuring people have a decent livelihood and sufficient income to do so. So that's definitely, some of the things that I mentioned earlier, and this is a good example of how you can get engaged and address some of those issues.
And Georgette, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I just wanted to tell the person that when we speak about responsible mining, it involves all those. Because we don't have time, we didn't elaborate, but responsible mining and responsible sourcing, it means that, chemicals, labor, fair wages, all of that encompasses responsible mining and decent work and infrastructure, etc., etc. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Sonia was asking, are there strong enough regulations in place to ensure better practice or best practice across the world?
Yes, for example, there is the Minamata, then there is an ILO. ILO also acts against child labor, and a lot of governments are working strongly to eliminate this. And I have been in a project up north in Ghana, and the child labor, it is not just the issue of child labor. Sometimes the women just have nowhere to leave their children. And so Alison mentioned access to education. So sometimes these are some of the issues. Maybe a school nearby, maybe getting the woman to organize a cooperative, and one woman, they take turns to take care of children. So sometimes it is not actually, but it's just that the women have nowhere to leave their children. So that's all encompasses it: access to infrastructure, access to education, all that. So in my country, for example, there's free education now by the government. And so the free education, now the woman on her way to the mine can leave her child and go freely to her work. But if there is no school in her area, she's probably going to strap the child on her back and go to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got time to squeeze one final question in. It's actually from Sonia again on YouTube. It came in a lot earlier, and she was saying it would be really helpful to have information to show children at school, because mobile phones are so common, and they're used at younger and younger ages now. So are there posters? Is there information available out there that we could point her to?
Yeah, there is actually, and one of the Irish Geological Survey have just done something recently. So, if Sonia, if we can get a contact for Sonia, we could point her towards that. Actually, at the museum, we ran a module for school children looking at components in mobile phones and getting them to look at that. So, we probably still have that resource that is possibly. So let's check on that and get back to you, Sonia.
Brilliant. We will definitely do that. We are almost out of time. Just in our last couple of minutes, just one final question, just one final thought from all of you. How optimistic are you for our green future? Just quickly from each one of you. Richard, how optimistic?
Yeah, I'm optimistic, because I think we've all got the appetite to do something now, and we see that there's a lot of civil movements, even in the across the world. So I'm optimistic that people being concerned will make sure things change.
Absolutely. Georgette?
Super optimistic, lots of technology, and we need to take up technology quickly and leapfrog. Super optimistic.
And last but no means least, Tirza.
No, I think yeah, we should continue to be optimistic, as there's some new technologies coming, but also, there are many of us on that mission, right? Fairphone is started as such. We're on that mission for ethical electronics. We're there to make sure and to have fairer working conditions, to look at fair materials in our product, to encourage consumers to use their devices longer by the way we design it. And all those different aspects. So that's a mission we are on, and luckily we see more and more people on that mission, and we do invite. I think especially that is important. Consumers to continue to make those conscious choices. If you do make, another purchase, think about what you do, and then also we invite our industry peers to consider that as well. So I think we see that happening. We are on that mission, and I think increasingly so are other stakeholders. So I think we should be optimistic.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for your insights today. We are sadly out of time. We've barely scratched the surface, but it's been a fantastic discussion. I have learned so much. It's really opened my eyes. So a very big thank you to all of you today. We will say goodbye to you for now, but we hope to be able to speak to you again soon.
Yeah, bye-bye, and thank you.
And thank you. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And thank you to all of you, our viewers, for tuning in today, for your excellent questions. They're always so brilliant. We hope that you enjoyed that discussion as much as I did. This event has been part of Our Broken Planet, our programme of events that combines live events, online events, but also a fantastic display open at the museum at the moment. Do check out our website and our social media feeds if you want to learn more about Our Broken Planet programme, and if you want to head to the museum and check out that fantastic display as well. Join us again tomorrow evening at 7:30, where we'll be talking about the future of fashion and rethinking the way that we treat our clothes. I look forward to that discussion. I look forward to seeing you all again then. We'll say goodnight for now.